Well, it's Monday, 16th January 2023. Hello, everybody. I'm Andy Johnson. This is AM Prime here on WESN. Here's what's going to happen over the next hour and a half or so. We hope you had a good weekend. We will be talking in the second hour of the program with Dr. Avril Hussain. He's political leader of a party called the Green Party of Trinidad and Tobago. He's president, publishers, broadcasters. He's put out a statement some days ago saying that he's calling on the media to stop what he calls blood journalism, the constant carriage on the front pages in the newspapers about murders and other deaths in the country. He says that that is a waste of time and that is selling us short. He says what is necessary is that there should be investigative reporting about how these deaths are classified, of what kinds of circumstances and situations lead to people being killed, and it's all not one and the same story. We want to talk with him about that on the other side of this hour. We're also talking with Mr. Rodney Pigott. He's a leader of the, one of the people in the Tobago Civil Net. They're talking about the annual performance by citizens in Tobago, review on the administration that is now in charge of political affairs in Tobago. Well, we're staying with Tobago as we start the program this morning. We're talking with Mr. John Arnold. He's the chairman of the Tobago Carnival Committee. It's against the background that band leaders in the Sister Island are saying they plan to boycott the celebrations because of the fact of what is allocated to them to bring out their stuff on Carnival Monday and Tuesday, $1.3 million. But Mr. Arnold is saying that all things are, systems are go from as far as he sees it. We want to talk with him about that. He's there. Good to see you, Mr. Arnold.
Morning.
All right, so you say that band leaders are preparing feverishly for the festival, while the reporting is that they are threatening to boycott because of the question of the money that's been allocated to the bands in this style. Let's talk about what transpired over the weekend, what you can say this morning.
I mean, I can only give you the facts as they are up to when we left work on Friday. And even the communication over the weekend, we actually launched Carnival Tobago under the brand of Mother of All Carnivals tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock at the Scarborough Esplanade. It's a media launch, yes, but of course we know because it's in the open, everybody will obviously see. But basically what has happened, Andy, and it's important for us to note this. By the way, just let me make one correction. I'm the CEO of the Tobago Festivals Commission. We have a chairman of the board. We are run by a board which is under the Secretary of Tourism and Culture.
Right. So the Carnival Committee is part of the Tobago Festivals Commission. Is that correct?
Well, the Tobago Festival Commission is a corporate body that's mandated now to handle all the festivals on the island.
Okay.
So there's a little difference from when we used to have a specific committee set up ad hocly for festivals.
Right, so there's no Carnival Committee?
No, there's now the Tobago Festivals Commission.
All right, thanks for that.
Yeah. So basically what happened is that we are always in contact with the stakeholders, and we did that months now, and we actually, fast forwarding, we've had several meetings. They submitted their budgets, and then we met with our principals, and our principals told us we have $9 million to work with for Carnival. And we went back to the stakeholders, and funny enough, we all agreed on what those reductions would be and what they would work with, right? As you know, the $9 million has to take care of all three SIGs, but it also has to take care of several other events. For example, we are part of the medium band finals, and we have the THA Panchams, and we also have the interpersonality interdepartment of the THA competition, which is one of our, what I will call mega events. So having done that, the next thing we heard is that there was some clamoring in certain quarters. At this point, of course, we guided my own communication with the chairman of the mass band leaders. We talk almost every day. And as far as I know, they will be at the launch tomorrow. They have indicated that up to yesterday. And as far as I know, basically we have kind of settled. Any new thing, I would have to hear about that today. But up to Friday and up to yesterday, as far as I know, we are moving ahead with the festival as planned.
So there's no threat, because we had Ms. Bedlow on late last week, together with Ms. Udine Job, and Ms. Bedlow was saying that she will continue to agitate, or if that's the correct term in this case, but to represent for a greater slice of this pie, while at the same time challenging band leaders to bring better stuff on the road for Carnival Monday and Tuesday in Tobago.
Right, so even our meeting, the articulation of better quality and more participation for mass in Tobago as a spectacle, those were promised. But beyond that, what I said is that she was advised that she would need to go to our principals and see if whether or not they can afford an increase. What I'm saying to you, and is that at this point up to today, right now, this morning, I'm going to work in a while. And my communication up to yesterday with Ms. Bedlow was that her bands will be there tomorrow for the launch. And she also would like to get a letter today for me to give her so that she can go ahead to help with some opening a particular account for the new body that they have established. So that's why I'm saying I don't have any other information of an increase. I, at this level, the CEO, can only move with the dictates and the instructions from the board or from the secretary through the board. And what I'm saying is that to this point, I have no further instructions on if that money has increased. What I do know is from our own tete-a-tetes and our own communications, we're going ahead with Carnival 2023.
Right. So, what do you think? This threat to boycott maybe is just vacuous?
Well, I can't speak for the organization. It would be hard for me and a little premature for me to say what they will do. I can only give you the chronology of events as they unfold. And as I tell everybody, I like to talk things in the garden of truth, because I find it so much easier to deal there than to try to remember anything that is said off script, you know?
Yeah, but that's been much of the reporting coming out of Tobago, people using terms such as disrespect and so on to describe this $1.3 million for band leaders to bring their stuff out on Carnival Monday and Tuesday.
Yeah, Andy, I think one of the things I keep saying is when you sit in a room and you have dialogue, you have discussion, you have a certain level of negotiation. I think the things about is that on the governance side, you have the issue of funding challenges. So for me, you have to have what I call funding empathy on that side. As a creative, I'm also one in that space. I have to have empathy also on that side. And I understand both sides. But I think the challenge will always be, how do you marry these two? And how do we have the dialogue that affords us to create consensus with reality? And I do know that on one side, you do have funding challenges, right? Also, I think one has to put on the plate the fact that you have established an October Carnival, and the transitionary period that would be needed for developing that October Carnival so that it becomes a solid mega product would also call for some time. So I think in moving that way, you would also find that there may be elements over time of the February Carnival that may start to be de-emphasized as we raise the October Carnival up. So I think there are a lot of things to discuss, and that's why I'm saying it is only by forming consensus. I'm not too sure protests and bacchanal, all these things really work for development, not from where I sit anyway. I don't see it working that smoothly.
One of the things Ms. Beddow also said that she was challenging the band leaders to come better than that, so to speak, because she said she was describing a situation in which so you have a band on the road and you have a section with 4 people, a section with 5 people, and then the creativity as to what is presented leaves a lot to be desired. So she's batting on different fronts, as it were, as well as yourself. You see, you are creative, which everybody knows, and so you're part of the administration. Let's deal with that first. Then, how do you balance the two in your own case?
I mean, my own case?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, one has a job to do as a professional, and I think it affords me the fact that I'm able to see the two quote-unquote empathies. So it's one where I think, that's why I said we have to build consensus, and you can ask any of them. The one thing we try to do is to sit around the table and have discussions. We have done that several times, Andy. And Jamal can certainly certify this to you. We have done that. And that is why, for me, it was unfortunate when I heard that in terms of bands coming together, because their leaders sat with us and we had talks. Actually, we met with the secretary and the assistant secretary on January the 5th, along with the chairman of my board and myself. And we had a wonderful meeting. So much so that when we recapped, one of the recaps was we recapped what the allocations would be, what we will be doing. We even discussed things like bringing Juve back into Scarborough, all right, concentrating on that. We discussed mud mass being one of the competitive advantageous things about Tobago Carnival, right? Because it's one of the largest mud displays you can see. And we talked about bringing that out on a Monday. We talked several things. And part of that discussion was exactly as you said, that there will be an attempt to deal with the quality of mass and participation, because those have been two of the pain points that have been pointed out over the years. The fact that the mass, we don't have large bands, we don't have good representation, and the quality is a little bit wanting. So those two were promised for this year. And for me, that augured well. But beyond that, we did sit in a room and agree to how we will deal with the new figures. And actually, Andy, just to close, they were actually asked to now take those amended figures and now decide. In the case of Pantry Bagel, for example, they said, you know what, one of the things we can cut out is the pan in the schools, because the pan in the school programs needs to be revamped, and we need to also raise the capacity to get that off the ground again. So they made certain adjustments, everybody, you know. So I think it calls for adjustments, it calls for amendments to what your original 3.5 budget would have entailed.
Yeah, and what do you, how is it from what you said earlier? There's an attempt to, or there's a discussion going on about sort of de-emphasizing the February Carnival or the pre-Ash Wednesday Carnival, whenever that is, in each different year, in favor of the October Carnival. That is sort of the trajectory is moving like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's early days still, but those discussions are taking place in different spaces. All right. And, you know, as I said, the stakeholders will have to have a big voice in how that is done and how it is morphed and how that transitionary period, they will have to have a big part to do with that. But also the governance will also have to have a part in terms of policy, what they want to see, what they want to get, and so on. So that's in the space as a discussion. But there's absolutely no way I can pronounce on the government side. That would be for the THA to say that. But I'm just talking as a festival arts manager, some of the things that have to be discussed in the space, and that have been discussed actually. Yeah.
And go ahead.
No, I'm saying it's ongoing. It isn't definitive yet. Yeah.
One of the things that Ms. Bedlow was referring to or challenging the concept of or the specter, the picture of a band of the year getting $30,000. She says, well, what is that? What is that going to be worth? How respectful that is?
Andy, yeah. So Andy, we don't dictate that, you know. If we give the budget and they then dictate what the prices and so on would be. So I need you to understand that we are not dealing with the nitty-gritties. All budgets are presented by the SIG. So when we gave them the figure they were supposed to now send us back an amended budget showing how they made the cuts. And that's what we have agreed. I haven't gotten that back as yet, but I'm just telling you the process.
All right, so I suppose, so what you might have been saying there then, given what the allocation is and from how they do their numbers, how they do the breakdown of the numbers, that is what will have to be allocated as a part of the price. And she's saying that is not going to take it very far. But what you're saying is that, I'm not sure I want to use the word duplicitous, but you're saying that the same people saying different things in different fora on this question. Around the table, you know, they're saying one thing, and the sense is that, from what you're saying, is that around the table, people are more or less in agreement as to what is available and what can be dispersed. But on the streets and to reporters, they're saying something else.
Well, I think certain people will probably have their own challenges with their organization. So, you know, you can sit in a room and agree to this. When you meet your membership, maybe there are people who have different views. So, I mean, one of the things you do in that case is, I don't think from a process angle that you need to hit the streets. What you need to do is literally come back to the table and invite more discussion to deal with that. And that would have been the approach that she was advised by persons in responsible places to say, hey, you need to send an official letter. But as a matter of fact, I told Gemma that she needs to send a letter to the secretary from the organization stating what they're dissatisfied with, further to those discussions we had, and let's take it from there, right?
So as we head into this new week, what do you expect to be happening?
I think people are hungry for carnival. I think the carnival bug is there, and I think people are going to be playing carnival. I see a really great carnival for Tobago 2023 in February. That's what I see. And I think all the brouhaha will work itself out. I think so. But as I said, I can't prematurely say what will happen in the people's own organization. But I can only say I'm very optimistic that it's going to be a positive outcome for a great carnival. That's what I'm saying.
In the final analysis, that's what you see.
I see. Yeah, that's what I see.
All right. What do you see to sort of deliver on this aspiration for, let's call it a Tobago version of the mother of all carnivals, wherever that term comes from and whatever it means to people who put it out there?
Are you talking about the concept, or are you talking about what we're going to be offering for Tobago?
Yes, in Tobago.
Right. In Tobago, we normally have several things that form a part of that. The Children's Carnival is a big part of that. We have that. We also have the medium band finals of PAN will be hosted in Tobago. The last time that was held, which was actually the first time, 2019, it was one of the biggest shows we had in Tobago. So that, I think, is going to be a flagship event. That's on Sunday, the 12th. We also have the THA Pan Champs, which everybody looks forward to. It's very community competitive. We also have the Kings and Queens of the bands, and we have the THA Interdepartment. So apart from those, we have the Children's Carnival the following weekend, the Carnival Saturday and Sunday, both in Scarborough and Windward. And then we have Carnival in town. We want to bring Juve all in Scarborough. We're hoping to do a Juve in Roxborough on this Sunday. And on Monday, we want to do the Monday Mud Mass Creative in town in Scarborough. And Tuesday, we want to do the Pretty Mass in town. So, and the night mass, of course, on Monday night. So those are the key elements. Traditional mass on Monday. Those are the key elements that you would see for the Carnival week for 2023.
Well, you say in a number of cases, you say we want to. So there are, what are the constraints on delivering on that wanting to then? So there's the money question. What else?
The constraints? Oh, well, let me just say, Andy, we have had our first meeting with fire, police, TEMA, and health. And of course, in those meetings, we saw many things. The main discussions are traffic, logistics. For example, the police spoke about the horror of Crown Point for Juve in Tobago Carnival. So again, they welcomed the idea of Scarborough. In the case of health, we were told about the food badges, the new approach. You have to have brand new badges and so on. So I'm saying from the agencies, the things that we have to work on are working with those other services stakeholders to make sure that we kind of dot the I's and cross the T's in all kind of, and have all the ducks lined up. So those would be, apart from the groups having to make those amendments with their budgets, but I see those to be the critical thing. We had a meeting with health, and that was very good in terms of the approach for COVID. So we'll be setting up stations and advising people. There's an awareness education campaign to again do a reminder campaign. People wash your hands, and as much as possible, try to wear masks if you do wish to, and so on. So I think all in all, we have actually set up a WhatsApp group with some of these agencies so we can have real-time communication. And so far it's working pretty good.
Yeah, do you know what's the level of vaccination in Tobago? COVID vaccination?
No, I don't have the figures offhand. No.
Yeah, all right. So you went back. Let's go back on something you said about the pan competition. So you said the medium. I presume it's pan you're talking about here. Pan you're talking about here. The medium, the pan Trinbago medium bands.
National.
Right. That's pan Trinbago.
Yeah, pan Trinbago.
Right.
National finals is taking place in Tobago.
The medium band, and then there's another event, the Pan Champs. That's it.
It's called the THA Pan Champs, the Tobago House of Assembly Pan Champs. That's a local show in Tobago where only Tobago bands compete to see which one would be the Tobago champ. Yeah.
What are the dates for both of them?
All right. The 12th would be the THA Medium Band Finals, National, and the 14th, Tuesday the 14th, will be the THA Pan Champs. Those are the dates for those.
Yeah. I think I have some faint memory of when the sort of national, was it the medium bands category was held in Tobago, so you had this situation with Steve Lyons having to move from Trinidad to Tobago and come back and so on.
Yes.
Yeah. So that is what is being repeated here.
Yes, and Beverly Ramsey Moore, we are working very closely with her, because we are just assisting and facilitating. But Pan Trinbago is really the one that's going to be kind of spearheading this. But as I said, because we are on the ground here, we are going to be working closely with them, and we are also assisting them financially.
Yeah. Is it as a result of her being a Tobago lady why that is happening? But I'm trying to remember if that happened under maybe what is that?
Patrick.
Yeah. What Patrick Arnold was you all related? That's your brother?
No, that's my cousin, my first cousin.
Okay, right. As I'm going to call the name, I said, but so that was that under him at that time?
No, he didn't bring there was never a pan final in Tobago. That has been an initiative of the new Pan Trinbago Initiative. But what he did bring to Tobago was the Champ of Champs. I forgot the actual name. You know where they do the winners?
Yes.
He did that to Tobago after.
Yeah.
Which was a national thing.
Right, because I remember that situation in which bands from Trinidad went to Tobago and then had to come back and so on. So that is
correct.
That is an attempt
it's always something from a logistics, bringing bands on the ferry and so on. It's always a logistical nightmare. But I think once you work early It's always worked out. And those meetings, I'm sure, would have taken place with Port Authority.
All right.
With, yeah.
All right, so,
With
so what's on your schedule today?
Today we go to work and we have meetings as usual, the EMT, and we will be speaking with Gemma and the others today. We almost talk almost every day. We did communicate yesterday, and we're looking forward to the launch tomorrow. We're going to be launching our website, TobagoFestivalsCommission.com. So we'll be doing that also, and people can stream live and so on. So that's what we have tomorrow. Pan, Mass, Calypso on the Esplanade, and the media will be there and so on. I hope you will have somebody come there and also be part of that. But that's what we're going to be doing today.
All right, well, thank you very much, sir. Mr. John Arnold, CEO of the Tobago Festivals Committee.
Thanks a lot, Andy.
Very welcome. We will stay in touch with what is happening as these things develop over the next couple of weeks. Thank you very much. This is AM Prime. We'll take a break. Much more on the other side, including our look around the region a couple of times. Stay with us.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
At Belgroves, celebrating life is our commitment with integrity, compassion, and dignity for your loved ones. Belgroves Funeral Home and Crematorium, serving Trinidad and Tobago for over a century.
The best laptops and tablets are at dbesttoys.com. Get a Gateway 14.1-inch Ultra Slim notebook or an HP 14-inch laptop at the best prices in TNT. Get the Fire 7 tablet for $474. You can also shop the latest Amazon Fire Sticks. Call now at 32-DBEST to order or visit us in-store at Forces Flagship Mac Bean. Shop online now at dbesttoys.com. Free delivery available throughout Trinidad and Tobago. Cash or links on delivery.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, The Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
Welcome back to the program. Well, we're staying in Tobago. Let's tell you what's happening in this discussion we're going to have in a moment from now. The citizens' poll of the THA's performance for the year December 2021 to December 2022. This was the first of its kind in the sister island. It was conducted between December 4th and December 17th. The poll asked a sample of the population currently resident there to rate various aspects of the performance at the administration, both the administration and the Minority Council. The responses were supposed to be put in such categories as excellent, good, above average, average, below average, poor, very poor, and not sure. 315 persons polled in this, and it revealed that the majority of residents had the opinion that the Tobago House of Assembly administration's overall performance was below average or worse than that. To talk with us about it now is Mr. Rodney Piggott. He's chair of the organization known as the Tobago Civil Net. Good to see you, sir.
Good morning, Andy, and good morning to your listening audience. How are you this morning?
Well,
and
good.
Happy New Year.
Good, thanks, and good to have you. Happy New Year. Many happy returns. So let's talk about this. You know how that came about and why this decision to rate the performance of the administration 1 year after?
You're asking how did that decision come about?
Do you know who organized it?
Okay, you're sort of coming across mumble, Andy. Who organized it?
Yes.
Okay, yes. This was conducted, Andy, by both the Tobago CivilNet organization and the Tobago Council of Elders. So it was a joint effort. We pooled some members from CivilNet, some members from the Council of Elders. We came together and met repeatedly for about 6 weeks. Took time out of our schedules, and we met at the library and organized and put it all together. Questions were also fielded from the general public, and we sort of sifted through the questions to make sure that they weren't biased questions. So some of the questions we received may have had some bias in them. We were able to sort of vet those questions and put them in a form that did not lead the participant to any particular choice of answers. So that was something that was very important for us, is to make sure that the questions themselves were not leading questions. Persons could read them and from the questions answer according to how they felt about that particular situation.
All right, so the Council of Elders, that's the organization in which involving such persons as Mr. J.R.P. Dumas, right?
Yes, Elder Dumas, Dr. Eastland McKenzie, as part of that, Mr. Jeffrey Lewis, Mr. Carlton Dillon, and Nurse Wright. We call her Nurse Wright, Margaret Wright here in Tobago. So all of those are currently, and also Mervyn O'Neill. So those currently comprise the council, and they're looking to grow themselves this year and get into some field work where they're able now to move into various villages and sort of help to activate the elders in those particular areas. Because, Andy, an elder is something that every people must value their elders, because those are your walk-in libraries. Those are the people that have been around before we have been around, and they have seen things unfold. They've seen the mistakes made, and they more or less have an idea of the best practices of that people. So they have the people's truth, what really works for us and what doesn't work for us, what has not been working for us. And so the elder in a community is the person that you would want to turn to when particularly you're confronted with something that you may not know how to deal with it. So in this case, this poll was never done before in the Tobago space. And I near say, I don't know of it being done anywhere in the world, but I know it has not been done in the Tobago space. So there was no precedent. There was no, sort of outline to follow. And so the elders came in and they were able to lend up their experience, their knowledge and so forth, and guided this process so that it came out a very unbiased poll. That was the stress, is to make sure that there was no bias in the poll.
Yeah. So the Council of Elders it's a constituent element of the Tobago CivilNet, or it's a body separate and apart?
Sir. They're separate and apart from the Tobago CivilNet. They're standalone council.
Yeah. So let's talk about the questions themselves then. You say that the work was done to sort of eliminate or remove what you consider to be leading questions. You remember a question that in the view of you all would have been leading?
A question, I can't remember offhand, but a question such as something to go along the lines of something that would say, did the THA, do you think the THA improved from the last administration, something of that nature. So a question like that would imply that the THA needed improving, that the previous administration needed improving upon. So a question like that presupposes that improvement is needed, you see. And so if you ask a person a question like that, then, you know, you're asking them to answer from the direction that you've already planted the seed in there in the question, that the previous administration may not have performed all that well. And you're now asking, did this administration do better than the last administration, or improved on the last administration? So a question like that would be like a leading question, because you're suggesting to me that someone did not do well and someone should do better than the other one did, and so forth. And you just cannot ask a question like that. You have to sort of remove that bias from that particular question.
So what you have then an idea of one or two of the questions which were seen as more acceptable?
Well, yeah, I mean, I sent you the report, of course, so you have the report there, Andy. So you have all the 16 questions that we would have chosen. For instance, the very first question speaks to the chief secretary itself. So it says, according to the chief secretary, or so it says, according to the chief secretary. So this is not going to be a verbatim quote. The THA will create e-governance platforms for the public to monitor in real time and weigh in on everything we do. The public will be part of every single project each step of the way. And the question is, how will you rate the administration's performance in this area over the last year? You see? Yeah. So that's a question that gives you the verbatim comment of the chief secretary. As a matter of fact, prior to him becoming the chief secretary, when he was on the campaign trail, this is an utterance, verbatim. And so the participant is now asked, you know, how do you rate the THA's performance in that particular area over the last year? And so that person would then have to, you know, answer accordingly. If they didn't know the answer to it because they didn't know such a comment was made, then they would put not sure. So we gave them that option to say not sure if they are not aware of or do not have an answer to that question, or feel like they don't want to answer that question. They could certainly say not sure.
Yeah, well, I have to say that I didn't see the list of questions at all. What I'm looking at here is the notes that I have in front of me. But so was there any question having to do with what has happened? I'm not sure you could say with the administration, but in the party that forms the administration, how in fact the except one person in the administration broke away from the party, that was the vehicle by which they formed the administration? Was any question having to do with that? Well, what happened in the politics of the party that won the election?
You mean like the PDP party on their campaign trail? Okay, so you're referring now to what happened to them once they got into office and the separation that happened and so forth?
Yes.
No, that's not a question that we put forward. That, you know, we avoided those kind of what we would say is commerce-driven type of issues, and we sort of stuck to performance because it's a performance review, and so we were more interested in how they perform. Now, a question that was asked that would allow a person who's participating to think of what they know that might affect that situation is a question of how the assemblyman, let me find the exact question there for you, Andy.
Yeah.
It speaks to how the assemblymen themselves function towards each other. Let me see if I can find that right there. Okay. All right. So a question is, well, two particular questions dealing with behavior, if you will, that the public would have noticed or may have noticed, because there were quite a bit of commentary coming from persons concerning, whether they could reach their assembly person now. Prior to election, I could ring them off the phone, but now that they're elected in office, I can't find them, and so forth. And also how the assemblymen relate to me now. How are they relating to the citizens now? So the question is, how would you rate the overall manner in which assemblymen relate to the citizens over the last year? So that's a very plain question. It doesn't insinuate anything. It doesn't insinuate bad behavior or anything of that nature. It just asks, how would you rate how they actually relate to the citizens of the last year? So now the person taking the poll now personalizes that. And if they have a personal experience or personal experiences where they feel as though, they're spoken to in an arrogant way or anything of that nature, they will now answer that question accordingly. Someone who feels like, my assemblymen, we get along great. They speak to me great. I see them conducting themselves great. They will answer that question accordingly. Another question is, how would you rate the overall manner in which assemblymen have related to one another and public servants over the last year? You see, again, we're not insinuating that they have behaved badly. We're simply asking the question, and then you, the participant, taking the poll, you will personalize that based on your experience, because that's what a poll is. A poll is I'm giving my personal opinion, regardless of what you may think or anyone else may think. This is what I think about that particular situation. So people will be able to answer that question. So now, what may enter into that answering of that question may be that rift that some persons may have noticed or seen as something that was aberrant in the space. And so when they're answering that question now, they may redound to thinking to themselves, I didn't like the way, Farley and Duke, this whole thing that went on between them, firing them as political leaders, and all of those things may now come up in some people's minds, and they may answer that question according to those kind of experiences. How they see them behaving in plenary, for instance, when they're having their plenary and so forth, their assembly, how they see them addressing each other. People are looking at that, right? And they see how Parliament conducts itself. I know they see how the THA conducts itself. And a lot of people are aware that the THA is not supposed to be functioning as Parliament functions. The THA was really designed, Andy, to be a non-combatant space. It was not supposed to have an opposition. The minority is not supposed to be functioning as an opposition, but rather as a check and balance against the executive. That's it.
Has it ever been seen to function like that? Because from the earliest days when the EAC was in the ascendancy and the leadership more than the PNM, and then when the PNM was, is it any different to what happens in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago? You said it wasn't mentioned, and people say that it wasn't mentioned to function in that way where you have this opposition inside there, but it's not been anything different, right?
No, I mean, to me personally, I don't see a difference, and that to me is disheartening because again, that was not the design. And Tobago being a small space, where practically everyone knows everyone and people are family and so forth and so forth. It has not boded well for the population, for the citizens, to have that kind of division. It's not a large enough space where you can have that kind of party dividing people and pitting people against each other. Because quite frankly, Andy, once election is over, the animosity that people built up during the campaigning season and so forth, that does not go away. That remains in place. So for the next 4 years, you see this playing out in the space where people who are not on the stage as actors themselves, they're just regular citizens. You see them on Facebook, you hear them on Facebook. The way in which they speak to each other is a lot of animosity, a lot of anger, a lot of, you can see the division. And that does not bode well for any given society such as Tobago, where a lot of functional unity is needed, where people need to work together in order to lift our space up and lift our living conditions up. Okay. And if you have this kind of division, then that will definitely cause a problem with that. You're not large enough to have that kind of division and survive being divided like that.
Right. Is it would you say it's part of the role and function of the Tobago Civil Net to sort of diminish, if not entirely remove, that kind of characterization of the politics in Tobago to move to the higher ground, which is what the aspiration is from what you're saying, and that has been sort of the ambition for the life of the THA?
That is one of our ambition, Andy, is by helping the citizens to see that we are the ones that are the employers of the THA. In other words, we give them work. We hire them to go in there and handle the business of the people. So the THA comes out of the people. The people do not come out of the THA. So that's a relationship that is incomparable, right? And so the people now must once again accept and realize that we are the ones with the power. And even though the THA employs 60% plus, some say as high as 70% of the population, you should not fear speaking out. If you see something, say something. So you should not have any fear that you will be victimized by your employee. If you see yourself as the employer, I put you there, and I'm not going to wait until 4 years to say something. So by putting this kind of tool in place, it gives the citizenry something that they can voice themselves on an annual basis, or even much closer than that. We're even thinking of doing this every 6 months. Well, certainly every year, but we're looking at a 6-month period where we can see the trend and so forth. And so be able now to see yourself as the employer, see yourself as being empowered, and not to be afraid of the people that you put in office, you see. And so that has been the scenario, the environment here in Tobago that I have seen, and I've heard from a lot of people, is the fear of victimization. So people do not want to speak up because they're afraid of victimization.
And is it a fact that there is evidence on the ground to show that people have been victimized for speaking up? Or is it that is a sort of native fear that some of us have? Because I tell you, back years ago, decades ago, when the Council of Elders, I'm not sure it was called that, but there was a group of eminent residents and citizens in Tobago who were going around trying to hold meetings, men and women, to try and move to a better place in the politics in Tobago. And in one case, they wanted to go around the island to inform people of what was happening and where and when the meetings would come to where they were. And there was somebody who had a loudspeaker system. He was approached to help do that. And the understanding I have is that he said that he was reluctant to do it. He was fearful of doing that because he was getting work from the administration. So he didn't want to jeopardize that by lending his services and his machinery to what was ostensibly a non-political initiative to get people to express their views about how the island could be managed better. So to what extent that is real, or to what extent people perceive that if I'm getting a bread on this side here, I'm not going to do anything that may even remotely be seen as challenging that.
Yes, I mean, I could certainly see that, and I understand what you're saying there, and I would definitely do some research on that part of the group. I haven't heard of that, so I'll definitely ask the elders about that. They would definitely know about it. But you're absolutely correct there, in that, again, as I said before, just because you are eating from the THA remember, that is your money. That is your tax dollars. And when I say your, I don't mean the person itself, but it's us, the people. And so, governments have money because the people more or less give them money or give them the resources to generate money. That money does not belong to the government, right? The island itself does not belong to 15 people or what you may call your THA assembly. It doesn't belong to them per se. It belongs to the people, we the people. So if there were no people on the island, you understand, there would be no THA. But if there were no THA, there would still be people. So if it belongs to anyone, it belongs to the people themselves. And the people themselves put the THA in place to manage their business and hire these people to go in there and handle the business of the people. And so if I'm working for the THA, I'm literally working for myself. So I should not be afraid of myself. So if I see something wrong and I want to speak out against that, I should not be afraid of someone victimizing me. What needs to happen in cases like that is, Andy, as I said, is consequences will have to come into play there. And persons may be afraid to do something because they see themselves by themselves. One of CivilNet's goal is to help people to see the functional unity between them, the way we used to be, Andy. When we heard about the Lenhan environment that we had, where people reached out and helped each other, your neighbor helped you build your house and things of that nature. Some of that still goes on, but this is something that was widespread throughout the island. People didn't have to know who you are personally to help you.
It was endemic.
It was just the nature to help you. Yes, sir.
Yeah, it was endemic. It was part of the culture.
Yes, sir. It was part of the culture. Yes. And that's what we're trying to get us back to, because it's in us to be that way. But Andy, what has happened is that party politics has really divided the people. And when people are divided along party lines or along any lines, it forms animosity. And that animosity is not necessarily that of the people themselves, but it's that of the leaders of those divided groups, the leaders of the party that maintains an atmosphere of animosity, because they need to control their people. They need to know when they go to the polls, I have these 1,000 people over here that will vote for me because I have them locked in. I have them hating the other party. You understand? So I know I have them locked in, and the other party does the same thing. So everyone wants to make sure that the people that have sort of divided to their side stays on their side. So they don't want anyone coming in now and trying to mix people and say to people, erase that line between you. You are one people. Vote for whoever you want to vote for, but don't vote for a person because you're sort of stuck in that party. I'm red till I dead. What does that really mean? So if there's someone else better that you think is better for Tobago, but they're not in the party that you've sworn allegiance to, but you know very well that this person will do a much better job for Tobago, you're not going to vote for them because they're not in your party, then you don't really love Tobago. You love the party. And that's the problem.
Well, how much you think there's a game changer has happened in this case, in which the people from the party that won so massively, every district except one, jettison the party themselves, and they're operating as 14 or 13 independents in charge of the administration. So maybe that will sort of move to a different plane, you would say, the politics in Tobago.
Andy, I absolutely love that. A lot of people don't. A lot of people think, they've lost their mind, it won't work, blah, blah, blah. But Andy, I see that as the perfect scenario. Because one of the reasons I believe people voted so overwhelmingly for this party is because they saw them as non-politicians. You understand? These are people who have not been in office endlessly. They have not learned all the tricks of how to maneuver and how to do this and how to do that and get away with this and get away with that. They're not politicians. They're representatives at this point, you see. And so people voted them in office thinking that they would go in there and actually represent the people, put people before politics. So now that they have divorced themselves from the party politics, they are now free to function as representatives of the people. Now, if they choose to go back into the party politics and form a party, you know, that's on them. I would be disappointed, personally speaking. I'm not speaking as Civil Net in that. I'm speaking as Rodney Pickett. I would be disappointed because I think what we really need, Andy, are representatives of the people in office, and let people go to the polls and vote for who they want to go in and represent them, not because a party says this is our candidate, but because the people say this is our candidate. This person has been doing work in our area endlessly without pay. We could count on them, and now that it's an opportunity for them to go in there and make a little bit of money doing what they have already been doing for us, we want to put them in office. And it doesn't matter what party they are or what party they are not. This is the person we want in office. And that's what it should be. Not a party selecting, this is who we want to represent you. And so this is the only choice you have for your area.
All right.
You don't have anybody else in that area to choose from.
All right.
So you're going to vote the party and vote that person in, whether you think that person is suited for the position or not. You're going to vote that person in because you want to vote the party in.
All right.
That to me is the wrong agenda.
Let's see to what extent this is going to be a game changer then. But thank you very much, Mr. Rodney Pickett, Chair of the Tobago Civil Net Organization.
Thank you, Andy. Thanks for the good conversation this morning. Again, Happy New Year to you and WESN. You guys have a great time. Talk to you later.
Many happy returns. We will take a break at this point. We're coming back on the other side of this with Dr. Everal Hussain, political leader of the Green Party of Trinidad and Tobago, president of that. On this question, what he says is that he's scolding the media, particularly the newspapers, for continuing to put blood on the front page with murders and high crimes in the country. He says there's a better way to do that. We'll talk about that and other things on the other side. Stay with us. This is AM Prime. The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through. Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
What's the best way to grab the attention of viewers? Please exercise more patience. You have to be kidding me.
Doing what we do best. I'll say at the very least it's a conspiracy of laziness against the people.
Join me, Keaton Shaw.
And me, Sean Michael Small, for Talking Point.
Weekdays from 8 a.m. to 9:30 a.m.
We go in depth on the trending issues and engage the most controversial newsmakers
as we get them to account to the people for their actions.
You can't go to the government with nothing. You can't go to cabinet with an empty hand, with a wish.
I'm glad that we're having this a sober, mature discussion.
In the present situation, I expect a continuation of the chaos.
Join us for the discussion, Mondays to Fridays,
only on WESN,
the content capital.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this, screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc? Every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
Join me, Sule A. Joseph,
as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Sight, Thursdays at 11:30 a.m., only on WESN, Content Capital.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you're doing now, Andre.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is there no pressure on Nicholas Paul?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go out there and rep the white and black.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinbagonians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door on.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
Welcome back to the program. This is AM Prime here on WESN. Moments from now, we'll be talking with Dr. Avril Hussain. He's asking a question, is the media profiting from what he calls blood journalism? But before we get there, let's just take a chance around the region. In this case, we go to Guyana, where the Ministry of Education has condemned what they see as an attack against a teacher. Said it occurred in a community known as St. Angeles. It's a primary school there. News Force Guyana has this report.
One day after the Education Ministry denounced the physical attack on a Graham's Hall primary school teacher by a parent, another teacher has been physically assaulted by a parent. The latest incident took place this morning at the St. Angeles Primary School in Georgetown. According to the president of the Guyana Teachers Union, Mark Light, the female teacher was attacked and beaten by a parent of a pupil who attends the school.
The teacher received some injuries, and the medical practitioner has reported something, but we're seeing scars and the face is swollen. The security guard as well has been injured. Other staff members who tried to intervene.
The injured teacher was taken to a hospital in the city for medical attention. The GTU president said the Ministry of Education must do more to safeguard teachers and take decisive actions to prevent such occurrences.
Here, in solidarity with the teachers of the school, this is becoming too frequent, where teachers are being assaulted by parents and guardians. It is something that has to be addressed. So we're going to continue to make the call to the ministry to take this.
And GTU General Secretary Coretta MacDonald, who was also present at the school this morning, condemned the assault. She challenged the Education Ministry to not only issue strong warnings to parents, but to be consistent in its response to the attacks.
We just had to see not a sound. The minister and the entire team, not a sound. If we are to debar parents from doing what they're doing, then we have to be consistent with our cause. And we have to take stern actions against the spirit. We can't do it for one parent and not do it for another parent because of their so-called statuses. We have to deem parents when they do wrong things, we have to call them out.
The GTU General Secretary said stern action must be taken against parents who are guilty of assaulting teachers. Just yesterday, the Education Ministry expressed grave concern over the physical assault of a graduate teacher, Sean Marshall, at the Graham's Hall Primary School. The ministry said whatever the circumstances, it is a reprehensible and ghastly act, and it is unacceptable and will not be condoned. According to the Chief Education Officer, Saddam Hussein, when parents or guardians are engaged in violent acts against teachers, it goes against established values and expectations. He said persons cannot be teachers, then ask those same teachers to teach their children. He assured that the Education Ministry will take appropriate action to ensure all teachers continue to work in a safe and secured environment.
All right, so we get to our discussion now with Dr. Avril N. Hussain, political leader of the Green Party of Trinidad and Tobago. He wrote a letter to the editor days ago calling on what he says, well, calling out what he says was blood journalism in the country, and it's a question of media profiting. He's challenging the newspapers to do better reporting on it, to categorize the kinds of killings, put it in some better context. Dr. Hussain is our guest now. Good to see you, sir.
Hello. Thank you for having me on.
How are you?
I'm fine.
All right. Well, why do you call it blood journalism?
Yeah, it's a term that I've come up with. You know, there was that term about blood diamonds.
Yes.
Where
was a movie or something.
It was a movie was made of it, but the term was there before the movie was made. Had to do with how you obtain diamonds, and some of it was due to, you know, the killing of lots of people. I refer to blood journalism as a way of defining a certain kind of tabloid journalism where, you know, we use journalism of this type to make our profits. And it's by covering particularly violence and murders. I love the description that people use to describe murders as, you know, death by interpersonal violence. And we know that as human beings, we are kind of drawn to the morbid details of murders. There's something in our nature that pulls us into those stories. And tabloid journalism takes particular advantage of that morbid interest that we human beings have.
Right, so when you were writing, when I was reading what you wrote, the thought came to my mind, and you said it in what I read, that when you were teaching journalism, the term, and that's the term that I came into this business with, as they said, if it bleeds, it leads.
I didn't quite get that. Could you say that one more time?
The issue of, like I say, you stated it, and I'm saying that before I saw that you said it, in reading what you were saying and the cautions you were handing out, I said, well, when I entered this business, that was the phrase that was around in newspaper newsrooms. If it bleeds, it leads.
Yes. I find that you know, the tendency is to cover murders, particularly out of the perspective that once you have a murder on the front page, and it's an old journalistic, I shouldn't say principle, but it's a theme, that if it bleeds, it leads. If there's blood in the story, it will be front page coverage. And I used to teach that at the UWI Institute of Mass Communication in Jamaica. And what I see is our tabloid newspapers, and it's all tabloid newspapers now, tend to cover those kinds of stories in great detail without going into the background of the particular murders. So the letter that I sent to the Trinidad and Tobago Publishers and Broadcasters Association was to draw attention to this particular inclination to make money off the murders of people, basically to make money off the blood of people of Trinidad and Tobago who've been killed. And I think that our journalism needs to go beyond just adding up the numbers, just adding up how many murders we've had for the year, and go behind the scene and explore the categories of murders, the circumstances that prompted these murders. And so we can have a better public understanding of why do we have such a high incidence of murders. And so that's, I refer to the...
Do you think it would make a difference? Because in a lot of cases, these individual stories, in each case, the reports try to say why this person was killed, who did the killing, whether it was a crime. People used to talk about a crime of passion, whether it is a crime of passion, whether it was a contract killing, whether it was a dispute that happened between two people, whether it was revenge for something or the other. Those are elements that enter into the stories one by one. But you're saying that we need to go further than that.
I think our press coverage needs to begin to explore in an analytical way, and this is what I call investigative journalism. There seems to be very little of that in our tabloid media. So exploring what the circumstances are that led to these murders, I think will help us better understand the reasons for the murders, and therefore what can be our solutions. So, for example, if you categorize the murders in terms of, is this primarily, not primarily, but a certain number of murders are described as, and this term, the variations on it, domestic violence.
Well, let's say gang-related, right? So a lot of, because there's that in the reporting. I'm trying to say, well, maybe there's a need for what you're saying, but to me, in every single case in which we talk about it, whether it was gang-related, whether it was on the basis of robbery with intent, because let's take, you know, the assault on the security guards in the Pennywise case, for instance, or in other cases where people go to put down a robbery, as they say, but they are armed to the teeth and they would kill in the process of doing that. Some of it happens because of turf, for, you know, drug turf in dispute. Some of it happens because of, we've had a couple in the last year in which mothers took the lives of their own children because of depression of one kind or another. So some of that is there in the reporting, but you're saying we should go beyond that.
Yeah, you know, if you look for the circumstances for the murder in those stories, you have to really read rather deeply into the story to get a synopsis of what led to this murder. So it could be a botched robbery, or maybe it wasn't a botched robbery, it was just a robbery. It could be an incident that escalated in the moment into the kind of violence which led to murder. There's a certain amount of murders coming from mental health illnesses, and you know, but I don't have a clear sense when I read the newspapers of what proportion of murders, for example, are due to mental illnesses. But if we had a better sense of that, and if we invested money into the kind of investigative journalism that does that kind of analysis, then I think we're in a better position to offer solutions. I don't know, for example, how many murders are committed by people who have been once in prison, who are let out, who were not provided with the kind of care and attention while they were in prison that would help them avoid personal violence when they leave. My impression of what prison is like in Trinidad is that once you get to prison, when you leave, you continue your life of violence.
Is it different anywhere else?
Say that again?
Is it different anywhere else?
I still didn't hear that.
I'm asking if it's different anywhere else.
Yes, I would think if you look at some of the European countries, if you look at places like Finland and Denmark and Sweden and the Netherlands, you'd find that their approach to prison is quite progressive. You go to prison, and yes, there's part of the reason is to punish you for committing something that was evil and criminal, but also in prison there's a considerable attempt made to reform individuals, to further educate individuals, to prepare them for re-entering society in a more responsible way. I don't have the details on this, but my impression of prison life in Trinidad and Tobago is that it is more about punishment and making your life as horrible as possible rather than rehabilitating you, rather than reforming you as an individual. I don't think in Trinidad we have the concept of restorative justice. Rather than sending people to jail, for certain crimes.
Well, we've been talking around it for decades, and there are people whose mission in life is to participate in that, and there are individuals. I mean, I can tell you that there's a section of prison work which is called programs, and there are organizations, there are institutions, civic, religious, who have people going into the prisons on a daily basis. A lot of it, I mean, I was part of an effort with a senior police officer who would go into the prisons on different days in the week and in the month to be talking with prisoners. And there's a whole, almost, I would say, an industry of people who do that in Trinidad and Tobago. Maybe it's not as effective as it should be. It's called programs.
Right. Well, you know, a lot of my friends say there's a lot of talk in Trinidad, and there is talk about restorative justice. But when I, hear stories from people who've been in prison, I don't get a sense that this is applied in a grand scale. The number of community service organizations that are involved, non-governmental institutions, but I don't think it's at the extensive level that we need to have in order to help individuals who've been in jail not go back to jail or not go back to a life of crime. So there are initiatives in the society, and I have heard of some of them, but I don't think this is an established norm in terms of what do we do with people in prison.
Yeah, well, of course, you probably know of the organization called Vision and Mission by a man called Wayne Chance, who had been himself on the other side of the law, and he built up. Well, he's deceased now, but he built up a tremendous goodwill and an organization that stands today. It's run by his wife, and there are other groups. I mean, the Catholic Church and other churches. You have people. Religious leaders who lead the charge, going in and interacting with both the prisons authorities and with prisoners.
Well, I think that's commendable that we do have some institutions that are at work, but I think the prison authorities themselves need to get much more involved and transform their approach to dealing with prisoners from a perspective of less punishment, although I suppose we do need that, to more the matter of rehabilitation and reform.
Yeah, and there's a lady who's a journalist, her name is Debbie Jacob. She came here from the United States decades ago, and she's established herself as one of those. She's organized debating contests among the various prisons, groups of inmates from one prison or the other, get together and have these debates, and there were a couple of finals which took place in places like Woodford Square and so on. But maybe you're saying it's not enough, and it's not sort of central to the whole business of
exactly.
Yeah.
There's a certain amount of achievement that can be accomplished with these civil society organizations, but the institution itself, the prison system itself, need to take this on as a fundamental approach to dealing with our current lot of prisoners. I don't have a number of how many people we have in prison at the moment, but one of the themes that I've heard people mutter about is that while you're in prison, you continue to be trained to be a criminal, so that when you leave with a sense of injustice, which is an odd phrase to use here, and so you go back to the life of crime. So it is wonderful to have the work done by non-governmental organizations, but our prison system itself need to address this in a more substantial way. Now, dealing with prison reform is one avenue to dealing with criminal behavior and high incidence of murders, but there are many other approaches that we could adopt if we had the kind of investigative journalism and analysis that would tell us more about just murders.
On the crime situation, murders. What has been the have you had any reaction to your intervention from, you address it to the Trinidad and Tobago Publishers and Broadcasters Association in the main. Has anybody reached back to you in any way?
No, I've not received any kind of reply. And while this letter was also shared with the media, in fact, your station is the only one that has reached out to get further commentary on this particular issue. There's a thing about criticizing especially our tabloid media, which will not get the kind of coverage one would hope for. While our tabloid media is very good at criticizing others, once you take a shot at them itself, they're very reluctant to cover that kind of criticism of the establishment.
Well, we try to go in a different direction here.
Well, that's very good, and I appreciate that endeavor. But for the media itself to say, listen, we have somebody who is criticizing our inclination to blood journalism and profiting from the blood of our people, that's a hard point for them to cover themselves. But, you know, and again, I'm thinking about this term, blood journalism. There's so many issues in Trinidad which involves blood, but involves death, but which gets the kind of minimal coverage. For example, there are almost 2.5 times as many deaths due to coronary heart disease. That is something that's avoidable. But I don't see any coverage, or at least front page coverage, of the number of deaths that come from people who have coronary heart disease. And it's avoidable. I don't see any analysis of that. I don't see any analysis of the number of deaths that come from diabetes. There are twice as many people who die from diabetes than die from murders. I'm not saying that you shouldn't cover murders, but I'm saying, well, just as important, the deaths from diabetes are also worthy of coverage.
Yeah, maybe not as sustained. Maybe not as sustained as it should be, but you find that there's sporadic reporting on these things because there's a day, the World Diabetes Day or Heart Care Day or whatever you call it, and there sometimes the reporting tends to come to the rise on those occasions when everybody is sort of aware of it and working on it, or sometimes in the case where sometimes a prominent person or a person who's had national attention may have fallen victim in one of these areas. But I think your point that there needs to be sort of more pointed focus and more structured focus on addressing some of these things than appears. This sporadic nature of it happens around, World Heart Care Day, whatever you call it. A Diabetes Day, when that is coming around, you find that somebody who's an event and those things come out. You're saying that it ought to be more structured and more concerned than that. More.
Exactly. I was just checking some figures on how many amputations there are per day.
Yes.
And most amputations are due to diabetes.
Yes.
There are almost as many amputations as there are murders in Trinidad.
Yeah.
I'm not making murder and amputation equivalent. But if you wanted dramatic news, there's a lot of dramatic news in the number of people who die from heart disease, the number of people who die from diabetes, and the number of amputations that we have. But that never appears on the front page. If you're looking for those stories, if they do appear at all, they're down on page 19 or something of the sort. And most people don't get to that page when they're reading a tabloid newspaper. So I always consider the first 7 pages, the first 11 pages, and even 11 is a limit that I would go to. But essentially, it's the first few pages of the newspaper that people skim and read. So there are lots of stories that relate to our health system, which affects, our death rate, but which doesn't get the kind of substantial coverage that I think they warrant.
Well, we want to thank you very much. So we here respect what you say. And every time I see something from you, I try and make contact because I think your intervention is critical and it's important. We have to pay as much attention to this as anything else. And sometimes it's good that people look at us and say, well, look, try and point us in the direction that we go. So we want to thank you for that around here.
Well, thank you for covering this issue. I don't think there'll be any coverage of it in tabloid press. Yes.
We will see, but stay good and stay focused.
All right. You take care. Be good.
Very well, Dr. Everald Hussain. Good to see you. Talk to you next time. Well, that will do it for us for today. Thank you for watching. We want to thank our guests. We tell you that in half an hour from now, we have news at the top of the hour, followed by today's edition of Talking Point with Shah and Small. But for now, I'm Andy Johnson. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.